It's the
Not cool.
lamest. It's the lamest fucking shit ever. And it's like, what, you want to go on a social media thing where your fucking uncle is showing off his 20-year-old girlfriend, or like your mom posts like you don't visit her enough anymore? Like that's what Facebook is now.
It seems like that was very specific.
No, I'm just talking in general.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we lovingly watched The Social Network.
So I think this is the first movie I can remember really well. No, that's not true because I cared in '06. But this is the first time I was really disappointed, and it sort of affected my view of the movie that actually won when this did not beat out The King's Speech at the Oscars.
You know what's so weird is that I guess I just wasn't that like interested in movies at the time. Well, that's not true. Not completely not interested in movies, but I just wasn't paying attention to like Oscar bait and Academy Award winning movies at that point. So when I watched this, I was just like, oh, okay, nice movie, and I just must have not really liked it or really understood what was happening at the time, because I was like, not quite even know who Mark Zuckerberg was, because when this movie came out in 2010, I was only on Facebook for like a year, and I was a late bloomer to it. But I think it only went public outside of Harvard and the universities at like what, 07, 08, right? So the world didn't even have Facebook for that long, but I only had it since '09. And so when this movie came out, I was just like, is this fictitious? Like, did this actually happen? Well, it turns out it didn't really all happen like it was portrayed, but it is, about real actual people, with hearts, minds, and souls, even though this portrays Mark Zuckerberg not really with a heart, mind, well, a mind, or, a heart or a soul. But
All right, all right. We've talked fast for long enough. In trying to move fast, you just talked for so long that you just took up the same amount of time.
what I was also going to say is that I have still never seen King's Speech.
It's good. Uh, it's like a much more like feel good movie though, because he gets over his stuttering. Uh,
What? You just spoil it for me?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
an
because
asshole.
the king is able to deliver a speech. So spoiler alert.
Is this
Uh
is that a true story?
the king's speech. Yeah, it's about the king and a speech he had to deliver, and he had a
Which
stuttering
king?
problem. King of England. I don't remember what his name is, but it was
Bef-
during World
Before
War
this one that just died?
II. See, I can't tell if you were trying to ask a question or get off a joke because it wasn't funny. And then I was clearly in the middle of answering the question you were going to ask, but it was during World War II.
Oh.
And no king just died, a queen just died in England.
No, I know, but that, whoever was the royal head at the time.
I don't know. I mean, she has been in charge for quite a fucking long time before she finally passed away.
That's true. So it
Um,
was her husband?
I don't know. I
Oh,
don't know. Yeah, I
okay.
don't. I live in a country that fought to not have to give a shit about that. So
Okay.
I also always forget. So this is like one of my favorite movies. Probably if I was going to do like a letterbox top four, probably wouldn't make it in because I was thinking about this earlier. But it is also one that when I'm thinking of Fincher movies, I almost forget every time. Like
That's a good point. I mean, all these films that we're doing is like would not make my letterbox top 4, but they're amazing films. Zodiac, Arrival, this. I mean, like, absolutely,
well,
like, Fincher makes amazing films.
and Truman Show, which we're still working on when that's going to come out, but we've already recorded it. I think that might be in my top four. Zodiac might be in my top four, but then I also have like In Bruges, Interstellar, uh,
Prisoners.
maybe The Ghost in the Darkness. But that's a childhood like David being in charge of that fourth spot. So, um, but this movie, like, and I do think of it maybe a little bit more of a Sorkin movie, but it's also like because you have Fincher directing it. Now, I am one of a few people that still enjoy like Sorkin and especially his directorial stuff that he does that he's put out. I liked that Lucy and Ricky movie that I don't remember what it was called. that came out a couple years back.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think he directed Molly's Game too, and I like that one. Oh, and the Chicago 7. I like that one quite a bit. People didn't like that one for reasons. Um, but I think the fact that, and I think a
Being the
lot of,
Ricardos.
there you go. I think a lot of people see it this way too, that you have Fincher controlling Sorkin in such a way that you get the best Sorkin, because
Well,
he has a tendency to kind of go in the like the treacly and like the super sweet, the saccharine, and Fincher simply doesn't allow that in his world. And so when you combine these two people, you get a nearly perfect movie.
yeah. Well, he directed this movie too.
Oh,
Sorkin.
he wrote this. Fincher directed it. He directed. Yeah, I know. You're gonna do the thing. You're doing your fun fact thing. He directed a second of the movie.
Okay.
The
Okay.
last second of the movie. He's actually in the movie. So he wrote, directed, and acted in a
He's a
perfect
man of
movie.
many
Yeah.
talents.
He
Yeah.
can't be fucking stopped. Did you recognize him in the movie?
No,
So he was the guy who, when
he
they're
was the
going,
ad guy. Yeah, I know.
yeah, when they're trying to get advertising. Yeah. So this one thing that I have, the story of Facebook has obviously taken a much darker turn in most people's eyes because of like the way it's used now, and whether you're left or right, well, at least in the country that we live in, but if you're whether you're left or right, like the chilling of speech, or whether they're not doing enough to control the hate speech or whatever, which I think is like, it's a fair accusation, but it's also like, that's how the internet works too. You know what I mean? Like, any form of communication is going to allow bad things to happen. So my point is, this movie is now like obviously in a much different context with the rest of it. And then when I go and read about the real story, and I'm like, I don't know why you changed so much. This still is like a great movie, but like, I feel like if you had kept it more factual, whatever, like, it feels like they could have still made him the bad guy that he kind of is, Zuckerberg, without changing it in the way he did, in the way the movie does. But it's just interesting because in watching the movie, you're like, all right, he fucked over his best friend, and he may or may not have screwed over these twins. But in reality, he really fucked over those guys, and he really maybe didn't fuck over his friend that much. They might not even really been that close. And so it's kind of interesting, that change. I would like to focus on the actual movie, and then maybe at the end we can focus on the factual stuff we can talk about a little bit. But I don't
Sure.
want to keep crossing swords on like what's real and what's not. Maybe like a little bit of detail here and there, but I think
I don't want
getting
to cross
into
your
it.
I don't want to cross your swords at all. So we're fine.
All right, well, good. Well, good. It wasn't a proposition. I think we can get into the opening scene with uh Rooney Mara, who
Yeah.
just fantastic. And this is the ultimate, like, oh, they're having to talk so fast to get the dialogue out scene. Like, that specific one.
I also want to talk about how there's just cameos of very famous women in here with very little parts.
Well, who else?
Dakota Johnson.
Oh, that's right. Well, except she wasn't famous at the time. This was kind of like, this almost seems like, so she's great in it, so maybe it wasn't, but it almost seems like a nepotism hire that she got this
Maybe.
through connections. But she killed it. Like, she is actually like, in a nothing scene, she's really good in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good introduction to Sean Parker, right? And like,
Yes.
I still think like Sean Parker probably holds the not, I want to say the best line reading in the entire movie, but definitely the most memorable quote, where it's drop the. It's cleaner, you know?
That's good, but I think before that, it's better than
A
$1 million,
billion.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
I'm actually literally, I have it on right here silently, and that scene's on. It's running. But yeah, so Rooney, I think this is a little bit early too for her. And then his next film, so this came out in 10, his next film comes out December of 2011, and it's her in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah.
which is like secretly my favorite Fincher movie. It's the one
Really?
I I just fucking love it.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it's
mean,
it's
because
great, but Seven isn't.
no, Seven's not. I like Seven.
Zodiac?
I mean, Zodiac's in the top two. Social Network, like this, Zodiac, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Social Network. Those are probably the top three for me.
Gotcha.
Which leaves out Fight Club, which if Garrett was on right now, he would guffaw at the idea because Fight Club's his favorite. So there's a lot of dialogue in this opening scene, but I mean, when Ashley, I had this on earlier, and she's like, "Are there really more geniuses in China than people in the U.S.?" I was like, I don't think so. Like,
Did
I'm
you
not
look it up?
sure. I did not. I didn't. Statistically, it doesn't make sense. I think it's like what? Because was I talking with you about this?
Yeah.
Maybe it was you that was talking about this. But like, there's the population. It just wouldn't make sense that 24% of China's population are geniuses. Um. So, and I know I said I didn't want to get too much into the weeds of what's real and what's not, but this woman, this scene, obviously, they don't, there's no way for to know if this actually happened. He apparently did go through a breakup, which he blogged about, but then he also started dating his wife as he was creating Facebook in 2003 when the events of this movie start. Um, but this scene, whether it's real or not, is so great. Like the dialogue is so good, and then there's this one line she says where like, you talk so fast it's hard to know what to aim for, and like as the audience you're watching this and you're like, yeah, they are talking so fast, it's like so hard to keep up. And like, I mean, it's just classic like Sorkin dialogue, right, where it's like people don't talk this, they're not this witty, they're not able to like rat-a-tat-tat back and forth to each other like this, but it's like so pleasing to hear and watch.
Yeah, and it's not even that clean, right? Because like she says things that stumble Zuckerberg, and Zuckerberg says things that she's like bewildered that any human would say. But the quick like recovery from those, and and then she leaves off. One of the greatest lines in the movie is, hey, you're gonna go through your life thinking girls don't like you because they're intimidated by you, or
No, because you're a nerd.
oh, because you're a nerd. That's right. But I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart, it's because you're an asshole. It's probably one of the best lines in the movie.
Like the most satisfying breakup you could have, only for her to then be. How many people are reading this guy's vlog or his blog? I said vlog because that's what it would be now. But how many people are reading this dude's blog in Massachusetts? Like it got to the people in BU like that. I don't understand. I didn't have a live journal in 2003, so I don't really understand.
It's funny because it's Facebook, right? Like for us, if we were mad about an ex and we put on our Facebook wall, hey, Cindy's a bitch. She's advertising C cups, but we're actually talking about B here, right? If we put that on our Facebook wall, every one of our friends would get that.
But not like how much when you go on. I mean, you don't. I don't think you go.
I don't go on Facebook anymore.
I only go on Facebook to buy shit on Facebook Marketplace. But like when you go on it now, it's the most hilarious thing about this movie now is because one of the central arguments was about advertising. It's like that's all I fucking see on Facebook is like ads and bullshit. It's not about my friends anymore.
Right. Well, another really funny thing that this movie brings up is that ads would stop making Facebook cool, right? Because it's cool now, right? It's cool. It's the lamest. Cool. It's the lamest fucking shit ever. And it's like, what, you want to go on a social media thing where your fucking uncle is showing off his 20-year-old girlfriend, or like your mom posts like you don't visit her enough anymore? Like that's what Facebook is now.
It seems like that was very specific.
No, I'm just talking in general. Like it's for old people and like washed out people, and it's not for like, I'm not saying we're young, but even people younger than us in their 20s and teens don't use Facebook anymore.
I mean, you have one to like keep in contact with like family, right? And like, or to, I every once in a while will just like I'll see a random post from someone I went to high school with or college, and then you're like, oh, let me click on their page, and then you kind of parasocially catch up for 5 minutes. You're like,
yeah,
okay.
But you can do that on Instagram now.
Sort of. It just depends on, I mean, the way the way people are on the internet now is kind of interesting, and like people don't just normal people don't share their life as much on the internet. They're just really following all these people who are trying to be famous, and like those are the people that post. But like, how many of your friends like really post like their day-to-day stuff anymore? That's kind of gone.
It's not so much their day-to-day stuff, right? Because when you're a teenager, you think every day is an important day, right? So you
Yeah.
post every day. When you're in your 30s, I think it's like you're getting married or you're having a child, and then you post about said marriage, said child, and then that's it.
Yeah, I remember having a I don't know, I just told my wife one time, I was like, "I'm never gonna tell you happy birthday on Facebook. I'm not writing you a sweet post because, like, I'm just gonna tell you in real life. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like, I don't understand that."
We don't do that
Re
anymore.
the one of the things that one of the last things I wanna talk about is she's like, "Well, what's the easiest final club to get into?" And he's like, "Why would you ask that? Are you asking that because you think that's the one I'll have the best chance of getting into?" And she's like, "Wait, what?" And he repeats it, which is funny. Your point of like they're trying to make this scene go so fast, but they repeat the line to make it feel more natural. And she's like, "The easiest one to get into is the one that anyone would have the best chance of getting into." And he's like, "But you didn't ask which was the best." It's
Oh, so
just,
it's the final clubs, not the finals club.
yeah.
I love that correction of him because it just shows how like fucking arrogant he is. Although I do that with my wife, so what does that say about me?
Says you also have Asperger's. Um, so yeah, and then that sort of scene ends, and the credits rolling over has he's running through campus, and you have that Atticus Ross Resner score
Right.
is I don't know, the score of this movie, it's like one of my favorites, and just those little notes playing as he's going. Like some of the notes feel like a horror movie, some of them just like maybe feel maybe a little too melodramatic, but it is just all works in concert. And like it makes that scene interesting, which is just a scene of him running back so the credits can go. It's very cool.
There's a great line in this I'm finding as more I'm talking about this movie is full of great quotes. Um but there's this really uh great thing by Eduardo, Andrew Garfield's character, where he's talking about he says something like, "Oh, I think it's Sean Parker is there." He's like making fun of his what he wears, and he's like, "Sorry, my Prada's at the cleaners. I'm not walking around in what does he say? Fucking hoodie and fuck you flip flops."
You like completely butchered it, but yes. And that's also like the second to last scene in the movie.
No, but we see Zuckerberg throughout the entire movie in those fucking Reebok flip flops with the socks on.
Apparently, Zuckerberg was quoted as saying that the only thing this movie really got right was like he owns every piece of clothes that Jesse Eisenberg wore in this movie. Like they got that perfect. Um,
Well, apparently
this,
he was
th-
like a kind of a popular guy, right? There's like a ton of photos of him at his time in Harvard, so they could just get the his wardrobe from the photos.
I mean, because he at Harvard created one of the biggest sites ever.
Yeah,
It also, I mean, Facebook has a lot to do with like the centralization of like the internet now. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you go to like a few sites, one of them being Facebook, Instagram. Like you don't go to a lot of websites anymore. Um,
true.
I mean, for a while, that's where I got my news, and then they got rid of it because I think they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have to start paying for this." No, like they,
I thought you said your nudes.
I, that's that's Twitter or X. So the next scene is like sort of this montage mashup scene of him drinking, blogging, and like his journal that he wrote, which a good bit of that is factual, is so pathetic. Like it makes him look like kind of a loser.
Well, from the beginning to the end, right? Like the end where he's doing Albright's refresh page to get her friend request accepted, and he keeps refreshing his page. It makes him seem as he's a billionaire, the youngest billionaire to ever be, and he's as big of a loser as he is then than he was, or as he was now than he was then.
Yeah, which probably wasn't true. So then he's decides to create this rating site, and the whole purpose of this is one, just to see if he can do it, like to kind of blog how like easy this was or how smart he is, and then he wants to crash the Harvard server, which he's able to do. That the also the brilliance of this is, this is a random Tuesday night, and this is cut interstitially with scenes from the Phoenix Final Club,
Mm.
where like getting more and more debaucherous, like them bringing in this limo of girls that want to fuck the next Fed chair, and showing like kind of what they're missing out on as they're working on this thing, and he's kind of leading this semi pathetic life. It's just like kind of a brilliant like directorial stroke to have directorial stroke. Yes, I'm having a fucking directorial stroke right now.
What's really good is just the way that this is formed, where in that opening scene, there's so much being told about his character, but at the same time, it's setting up of his jealousy of guys who do row. And then when you meet the Winklevoss twins and he finds out that they row, he's like, okay, I'll help you, fully knowing he wants to screw over the row people. And of course, like Armie Hammer is like epitomizes that kind of like 6'5", really handsome, get into Harvard douchebag,
Yep. Yeah, we're getting to that scene basically right now. There is this one line when we first see Eduardo across the table in a deposition, and he has Zuckerberg has this line. I guess that would be the first time somebody lied under oath, talking about like, someone was quoted as saying something earlier. And then we see the Winklevosses, and I gotta say, like, accusations aside, I do miss Armie Hammer in movies, because like this and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. are like, I think he's
You
great in both of those.
you saw Sorry to Bother You, right?
I did. I wasn't a big a fan of that as you and Taylor were, but yeah, he was good in it. His role. I mean, the whole movie's good. It's just like not. It's fucking weird movie.
Yeah, it's a fucking weird movie. And in this he plays twins, which it's like the way they digitally put his head on the other guy is just so flawless. I mean, this was made 14 years ago, and I think sometimes if it's done now, it's not as well. I mean, I don't know what version you saw, but I couldn't see anything wrong with that kind of CGI.
I did not. There was one fun fact that this film had more visual effects shots than the 2014 Godzilla, which is like Fincher loves to do that in movies that doesn't seem to need it, like Gone Girl. Like all the exteriors
Zodiac.
were like fake. Yeah. So,
The exteriors were fake in Gone Girl.
yeah, like it was in a house that was like and just all the outside as they're in the house are just fake. Like
Oh,
you
kind of like Parasite, kind of the way Parasite was done.
which I think we've talked about on a pod recently. So we meet the Winglevosses. They're talking about, they're talking about what he did with Face Smash. And then the scene in front of the ad board is hilarious when he's like, I believe I deserve some recognition. She's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, yes. She's like, wait, what? So then there's a scene where he's in class and some girl writes like, you're a dick, which apparently what she wrote was much worse, but this was going to be rated
Was it
R.
cunt?
She called him a cunt? No, I don't know what she called him. But my point in saying this is this was supposed to be rated R movie, and they cut a lot of things to make it PG-13. Like later on, one of the Winklevoss says, let's gut the friggin' nerd. And he originally said fucking.
You
And
can have one fuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they used it. Because there's earlier, like when they could, I think in the breakup scene, like she could have obviously thrown an F word out there. But he's leaving class and the teacher's like, oh, brighter men than you have failed this. And he just gives him the answer as he walks away. And he's like, oh, fuck off. Nothing in here is hard for me. And then he meets them and he's like, oh, are you two related? And it's like, I don't know if it's hit like, they're obviously portraying Zuckerberg as like on the spectrum, which there may be some evidence that he is in real life. I don't know. And this air of superiority and almost just like either he doesn't think people are smart enough to get when he's talking down to them or he doesn't give a shit, right? Like
Right.
some combination of that. But just like, oh, you two are twins. Like, yeah, like that's not a funny joke. Like, he's also socially awkward. But then it's funny. He's like, did I insult your girlfriends? And they're like, I don't know. We didn't ask. Yeah, we should have asked. And then they kind of go through the whole thing with him.
There's this funny interview. I don't know if you saw this, but it was an interview from the actual president of Harvard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm about to say?
Well, I don't know. I think you're saying it for whoever's listening, not just me.
Sure. So you know that scene where the Winklevi go to the president of Harvard to try to get Zuckerberg in trouble for stealing their idea, and basically he's acting like a real arrogant asshole, and he's like, you know, don't fucking waste my time with this shit. I don't really fucking care, right?
Yes.
All right. So the real president of Harvard at that time is the one that they were portraying in the film. He says, yes, I might sometimes, people have told me I come off as arrogant. However, I do have one very important rule that I abide by. If I see an undergrad in a suit and tie on a Thursday afternoon at 3, and he's not going for a job interview, then there's one more thing that he could be, and that's an asshole. And I don't talk to assholes.
Yeah, I've read some things on him, which, by the way, Lawrence Summers is actually kind of an asshole himself. First of all, he's also portrayed as a fucking moron in the movie. These guys clearly had their idea stolen by another student, and they could prove it. And you're like, oh, I don't give a shit about the code of conduct. I'm not going to do anything about it. Second of all, he says, they're like, this is $1 million idea. And he's like, I think you guys have your head in the clouds. Oh, no, it was $1 billion idea. Like one of the biggest ideas of the millennia
to ever come out of Harvard. Yeah.
And finally, there's this paragraph I found in an article about Lawrence Summers. Perhaps it was no surprise that Summers' tenure as president of Harvard has been quick and judged by many to be a failure. In 2005, which, by the way, this took place in 2003, and he was very new in 2003. In 2005, at an academic conference on diversity in the sciences, he called into question the innate aptitude of women as compared with men. And he had to resign early in 2006 because of that. He then went to go work for the Obama administration and then got on some boards in big tech. So I think, so there's that guy.
You know, if I was Zuckerberg, I'd hire him.
I don't know. Guy comes off as an asshole. The more I read about this, the more I feel like, you know, this is something I was going to get into at the end, but that the Winklevosses, like, they come off as a little naive, but they got fucked over in this, and they sort of are the brunt of a lot of jokes. But like, I mean, you know,
their last name is Winklevoss, so
their idea wasn't like revolutionary, but it is legitimately what he did that started Facebook. The whole idea around Facebook was, oh, you had to be in college to be in it. And I think it was years and years before he then was like, all right, everyone can be in it. And now it's just basically any other social network site.
Well, what's funny is like one of the things that is mentioned when Zuckerberg is first approached by the Winklevosses about this idea, he's like, okay, so basically MySpace.
Or Friendster.
Right? Or Friendster. I forgot about Friendster.
You remember Friendster? I never had a Friendster. There was Zanga for a while. People had. I didn't have one of those. Yeah, I had a MySpace that I didn't do much with, and then I got Facebook. Yeah,
I never had a MySpace. I went straight to Facebook. But I digress. So the MySpace thing, I was like, yeah, what is so? It is MySpace. I didn't even know MySpace. I guess I knew MySpace was around at that point, but it was the exclusivity of it all, right? That like attracted people to Facebook in the first place. And that's just kind of a weird thing, because now I'm remembering like my college days. I'm like, so you had a thing if you went to college, but also now Facebook has like, you can create private clubs within Facebook.
Yeah, well, like we talked about earlier, Facebook is like a completely fucking different thing than it ever was anymore. It almost would be nice if you had like a social media that was just like, so you could keep, I mean, that's kind of what Instagram is, but Instagram too, and like there's so much like AI bullshit on Instagram now too, like just fake profiles of fake people.
And so much nudity.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't think that was allowed, but now there is.
Yeah, so much nudity. Like, have you been seeing? Because my wife is pregnant, so I look up like different things about
Mhm.
pregnancy stuff.
Mhm.
Do you see all those breastfeeding women
No. No.
with like? So basically, it's actually genius on their part. Nudity is allowed if you can categorize it as educational. And so what women do to promote their OnlyFans is that they take a fake baby doll and pretend they're breastfeeding the fake baby doll, flash the camera, put it down under educational, but then in their bio, it's their OnlyFans link.
And you're doing this for research for your wife, your
No,
pregnant wife.
no. I look up baby stuff and I get them pushed to me on my For You page.
So the next scene is when he goes to Eduardo to start Facebook, and he's basically saying the exact same things that the Winklevoss said to him. One thing, so the movie portrays that the reason he wanted to fuck them over is because they're like, hey, this could rehab your image after Face Smash. And it's interesting, the movie portrays him getting mad at this when this is the same thing that he sort of said to his ex, right, Erica, like, I'm going to be taking, this will be good for you. I'm going to be taking you these exclusive things. And she's like, I don't fucking need that. Just like, oh, this will rehab your image. I don't fucking need my image to be rehabbed. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that. And Eduardo says that in the deposition where he's like, he didn't want his image to be rehabbed with Face Smash. He had like, shown what he could do to the university, and he, thumbed his finger at the ad board. Like, he didn't want what they were selling.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is funny that he was just like, Face Smash proved a point that I was trying to make, even though I was trying to like, I don't care about looking arrogant or an asshole.
Yeah. And then the thing about he's like, oh, I got punched by the Phoenix. He's like, it was probably a diversity thing, where he's like, oh, and then as he's walking away, he's like, you know what, it was probably a diversity thing, but who cares? And after this, in the deposition, he has this line. He's like, you think I'm jealous of the Phoenix Club? He's like, you know how much I'm worth and that I don't really care about money, but I could buy Auburn Street, which I guess is where the Phoenix Club is, and make the Phoenix Club my ping pong room. And the look from Andrew Garfield of just like, kind of just like, wow, like, you can't help yourself. And his,
Right.
throughout the movie, you see his lawyers, because like, as this is portrayed, he is like, I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm the wittiest, like, and I don't give a fuck about any of you. But it's like, you're losing this case for yourself.
Right.
Like,
Right, because even she said, the lawyer at the end said, like, you might be right, maybe, but no one likes you. You're not likable, and a jury is definitely not going to like you.
yeah. So then it cuts to the depot where he's like, did you know you were leading on my client? Or he says it to Andrew Garfield. Did you know that he was leading my clients on? And the lawyer for Zuckerberg says, objection, facts, not evidence, which I was like, that's interesting, because for deposition, it's a little like things are allowed a little bit more freely. Like, facts, not in evidence is not really like, not something I think you can object to as easily in a deposition. But I'm almost wondering if this is like, this deposition of Eduardo was like in lieu of him testifying at trial, because maybe, so he ended up becoming like he renounced his U.S. citizenship and moved to Singapore. But also, he could have just been he could have been living in a different state. So I'm curious.
I thought he was Brazilian.
Yeah, he was Brazilian, and then he became a U.S. citizen. His father moved to Florida, and then he renounced his U.S. citizenship for business reasons, he said, in moving to Singapore.
Is Andrew Garfield anything but white?
He's English or British or
Yeah, but
UK-ish.
that's still white.
Yeah, what is your point?
Just weird that they chose him to be playing a Brazilian.
I mean, Brazilians come in all sort of shades. So I saw a picture of Eduardo Savern. He looks kind of like him.
Really?
So Max Minghella, who plays, He plays what's the guy's Divya Narendra. That's I think an Indian fella.
Oh yeah, he's not Indian.
He's not. And Aziz Ansari, he auditioned for that part, and he said he's like, I did terrible, but I also wish they'd cast like an Indian guy for that character instead of like whatever this other guy is.
So I know you're sick of my fun facts, but I have one about this that it's more of a story. It's pretty funny. It's Army Hammer and the guy who plays the twin from The Neck Down wanted him to meet Divya because he was worried about his portrayal of being non-Indian in the film. And so as a joke, Army Hammer told the guy, "Hey, when you meet the actor, talk in an Indian accent like it's your own."
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that's a pretty good joke.
And he just like freaked out and was like apologizing that he was going to fuck it up.
I can't do an Indian accent. Why was I hired for this?
So then they go into, it's just like scene after scene of him kind of, I can't meet with you. I'm not going to meet with you. And then the lawyer's like, 39 days, you didn't do any work. But then on January 11th, you registered the Facebook. And then he's like, and then after that, you mentioned this problem. We also get this small scene after this about the relationship status idea, which was when Facebook started, like the biggest thing where you see some girl at college, you go on her thing, you're like, oh, single, or oh, in a relationship. Like
It's complicated?
What's complicated about it? It was a good idea. Like however he got that.
That did feel like, like in Wicked, where you finally see Elphaba put on her hat. Like the moment, like the donning the thing, that scene felt very shoehorned in. Like, hey Zuckerberg, that girl in Kim class, do you know if she's dating anyone? As he like runs away to go code it.
So the next scene is the Winklevosses finding out, and the way they find out is Max Minghella, his girlfriend, is on the site. And she's like, I keep getting spammed this link. I really hope it's cats that look like Hitler. I can't get enough of that. And then he goes and tells them, he's like, he stole our site. And he's like, oh, he has 650 people. And the one guy was like, I couldn't give free drugs to 650 people. Yeah, and then
in 2 hours.
Yeah, and then he's like, oh, his name is on the masthead. He's like, his name is on the front page. His name is on every page. He's like, oh, wow, I need a second for the classiness of this to waft over me.
I do like Army Hammer's portrayal of the two twins being so different from one another. One's like level-headed, one's hot-headed. They have different ways of handling things.
I still don't know which one is which, though.
No, I don't know either, but I do like how each one is a different character.
And then the other thing is like, he's like, well, and no, we can't. And he's like, why? And he's like, well, he's going to think it's stupid. And he's like, what? Why would I think it's stupid? And he's like, because we're gentlemen of Harvard. He's like, you thought he would be the only one to think that's stupid?
It's kind of, he's not wrong though, right? Because with that like prestigious title, it's like, you remember when you're young and everyone's like, I'm going to sue you, right? Or like whatever. It is kind of like, I know you're a lawyer, so maybe you don't see it that way, but it's kind of like a classless thing to like threaten suit on someone.
Well, I do disagree. Unless you're suing over a rap battle you lost, then that's pretty lame as shit. And then he has this line,
Sued over a rap battle.
Drake's suing his label and someone else over the Kendrick Lamar beef.
No.
Get with the news, man. But he has this line about like Mark was the biggest thing on campus that had like Nobel laureates, 2 Olympic athletes, and a movie star. And the guy's like, who's the movie star? And he's like, is that important? Which it was Natalie Portman, so it was kind of important. And apparently she invited Aaron Sorkin, and talked with him to give him to help him write the book, to give like the inside information on life at Harvard, so he could have that.
That's another thing that I was confused about when first reading this, is that this movie is based on a book, and then the depositions and everything came out in 2008. The book was written in 2009. This movie was made in 2010, and I was just like, how did they just jam pack everything what seemingly happened at the same time? And then I found out it's because the book was basically written at the same time as the screenplay.
Yeah, he was handing chapters over to Aaron Sorkin to, and then at some point, I guess Eduardo settled the suit, signed an NDA, and just like stopped communicating. So
Oh, is that what happened?
yeah, and then he is quoted now as saying like he has no hard feelings. The next scene's the
Well, he's
Bill
a
Gates scene.
billionaire. Go ahead.
He is. The next scene's the Bill Gates scene, which the guys afterwards who are like, dude, that guy said you could be the next Bill Gates. That's so cool. I don't even know who was speaking. I got here late. Like it was Bill Gates. Uh, and apparently Brenda Song was almost not allowed to be in this movie because of her Disney contract, because of the scene that comes after this where she, you know, is fellating in a bathroom.
Oh, yeah, but you don't see anything.
You don't. I mean, she's unbuckling pants though. You know what's happening.
She could be unbuckling pants, because he dropped his penis. I don't know.
In her. So, back to the depot where he's like, "Is this the first time you raise concerns?" And this is when he's like, "Do I have your full attention? No. Do I deserve it? I have a legal obligation to say no." And he's like, "You have part of my attention, the bare minimum. The rest is, back at Facebook where we're doing things your clients aren't capable of." And he's like, "Did I adequately answer your condescending question?" It's like, it's not that condescending. You're being a dick. I can't remember what it is because we might have already passed it. But I can't wait to stand over your shoulder as you write us a huge check. And he's like, "No shit." Oh, because it's the line where he's like, if your clients invented Facebook, they would have invented Facebook.
So later on, it's revealed that they ended up making something. Well, first it was called Harvard Connection.
And it's called Connect You.
And Connect You. And I was like, I've heard of Connect You before. And I couldn't have, because part of the lawsuit was they had to shut it down.
It's interesting. Well, they're paid quite a bit. So then there's this scene where he runs into his ex, and I couldn't watch it. It's like so fucking cringe.
Oh man, you fast forwarded it?
Yeah, I did. I couldn't handle it. I was
You're
just
such
like,
a pussy. No, it's a great scene.
I've seen it. I've seen it several times. I just didn't watch it this time.
She fucking told him.
Well, she told him, except she made a Facebook later.
Yeah, but who didn't, dude? I mean, if you didn't have a Facebook in 2009, 2010, then you were a nobody.
Fucking loser. But this leads to him deciding, oh, we have to expand. And he wants to expand to Yale and Columbia. And they kind of explain this later. He wants to expand to Yale and Columbia so that BU wants Facebook,
Right.
because he's trying to make her jealous. And it's what, like, later on, he's like, oh, it's the little big horn. We wanted to get into Baylor, so we did it at all the campuses surrounding them so they would want it. And he's like, oh, we're going to post in the BU newspaper. And he's like, why are we posting the BU newspaper? And then he's like, hey, we have to also do Eduardo's like, we have to also do Palo Alto, Stanford. They need to hear about us out in Palo Alto.
And why is that again?
Big tech, like that area,
Okay.
which is interesting based on the real story. So we next get back to when they decide to go to the Harvard president, and there's the Winklevi are talking, and they talk to Max Minghell's character again, who I keep saying his name because it's easier for me to say than the other character's name.
Divya.
And they're like, what do you even want? He's like, I want an injunction, I want damages, and I want him dead. He's like, I want to hire the Sopranos to beat the shit out of him.
Oh, one of the best lines in the movie. We don't need to hire the Sopranos. We can do that. I'm 6'5", 220, and there's two of me.
250. Yeah, he's fucking huge. They were huge. Row crew. Have you seen guys that row crew? So next we meet Sean Parker, who I think has the most negative portrayal in the movie, which, as the guy that created Napster and helped people steal music and set the music industry back, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Yeah, maybe. I I do like that when he met Justin Timberlake, he's like, "You don't need to meet me to portray what whoever you're portraying in that film because that's not me," which is such a seemingly Sean Parker thing to say.
Yeah, like whatever you're doing, that's not who I am. So we already talked about the Dakota Johnson scene. She's great. Their chemistry is great together. And then we also already talked about when they meet the president of Harvard. So the next real scene is the dinner with Sean Parker, the Shaunathon, which is just like if you've ever met some like smarmy asshole, it's just like all of that, just like I don't know. It's really great the way it's done. And he's like, well, why do you guys not have drinks? Christy, come over here. We're parched.
You know, one of the best things, and I might do this, is when you go to a table with full of guys and one girl, you ask the girl what her favorite drink is, and then you order it for the entire table.
Have you ever had an appletini?
I don't. Maybe I don't know.
They are delicious.
They are.
Um,
Didn't we do a movie recently with like someone ordered an apple tea? Oh no, it was Zodiac, right?
Aqua Velva.
Aqua Velva, yeah.
So also there's this one line we talked about, like the $1,000,000 $1,000,000,000 thing, but he says private behavior is a relic, and he's talking about it in the context of them finding things to pin on him so he would lose his companies. But also it's like with social media and the proliferation of that, private behavior is gone. You know what I mean? Like in that this Facebook helped that. And then remove the just Facebook.
It's
And
cleaner.
they have this argument, and it's like on the way home, he's like, you're trying to end the party at 11. We don't even know what it is yet, like just going at him. And he's like, I'm trying to pay for the party, like through advertising, which is it's an interesting like
Yeah,
argument, because like
it is.
if you do advertising, yes, people might think, oh, it's not cool if it's not done well. But then if you do, but you would retain complete control. Whereas if you do angel investors, you obviously have to dilute your control of the company to bring those people in because they're putting in so much money. So
Well, also like take example of like Twitter and X where you're they weren't really making a bunch of money until Elon monetized it, right? But then that came with a lot of backlash too. Or like there's like what's it called when a company is worth a lot just because
you're talking about the valuation?
I guess the valuation, but it's not even making any where it's not making any money, but the valuation is high.
Which is what Facebook was in the beginning,
Right.
For most of it. And then I think they had their IPO in like 2012.
But then what you could do though at that point though is you could just sell Facebook.
Well, I mean, that's what you're doing with angel investors. You're selling a piece of it for money. So the next scene is the animal cruelty scene, which is just one of the funniest parts, especially with him like, you feed fish, other fish. And
I love too how that analogy metaphor thing goes into the do you want to catch 14 bass or one marlin, the 330 pound or the 3,000 pound marlin. It's like unless your marlin's the size of a fucking Range Rover, it ain't
like,
3,000 pounds.
No guy is carrying a 3,000 pound. Yeah. And then we're in California, and just Sean Parker just happens to live across the street. So like that isn't how they met. I mean, he reached out to him, and then they had meetings, and then eventually he like brought him on. And he actually, in this movie, he like doesn't really do anything.
Right.
In reality, according to Facebook, he actually did quite a bit. But they go out, he tells them the Victoria's Secret story, and he's like, I told you all that because I'm banging she's a Victoria's Secret model. That's why you recognize her. And then he's like, do you ever still think about that girl from high school? And he's like, what? No. No. I didn't look it up. I should have looked up if the Victoria's Secret story is true. because I always thought like, oh, there's that one woman who has the song that came out recently about the guy that started Victoria's Secret, some guy in Ohio who's like, and how he's ruining young girls' lives
Man,
because of.
after that kangaroo story in Arrival, I don't believe any fucking story anymore in movies.
Well, you can't believe this entire movie. So, the English Regatta thing is so cool, and like it's actually just kind of a little cool thing where like the dad comes up and he's like, "I'm sorry, you and mom had to come out here." He's like, "Don't apologize. That don't never apologize for what you guys did out there. It was really close."
The way it was shot too, it's like so much time for like a scene that really matters very little in this entire movie, but it's shot like it's like I want to start rowing. Like it's promoting it's like promoting the sport of rowing.
You need to start getting ready a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And then it gets brought up. Facebook gets brought up, and the dad just is like, "All right, I'm gonna go get your mom." He's like, "I don't want to be involved with this anymore." And they find out that they're in 3 English schools, and he's like, "What do you want to do?" He's like, "I want to take our considerable resources and sue him in federal court," which is also just such a fucking great line.
Got the freaking nerd.
The next thing, Eduardo shows up in Cali, and apparently in real life, Mark did pick him up at the airport, and he's like talks to Mark privately, and he's like, "How's Christy?" And he's like, "Christy is crazy," and he's like, "Yeah, but it's still nice to to have a girlfriend." Like this really paints him as like a fucking incel. Like, he
It does, it really does.
cannot get a girl. And he's like, "I'm afraid if you don't come out here, you'll get left behind," which is once again him saying a line to someone that he shouldn't. And he's like, "What do you mean by that? I'm going to get left behind." And
Oh, the big slap in the face was how's the internship? It's like I
I
quit
told you.
the internship on the first day I arrived in New York. We talked about this on the phone. And it's just like this guy, this dude, man.
And then he decides to shut off the card, and then they have the Peter Thiel meeting, which Peter Thiel is a very very famous, maybe / notorious like angel investor now. And the guy that plays him is actually a pretty good approximation of like what he likes or what he looks like a little bit. And he's like, we're going to give you a 500K investment. He's like, "Now who is Eduardo Saverin? This guy that just owns 30% of the company, but isn't even at this meeting. Like, who is that guy?"
Yeah. That's man, they really paint Sean Parker as a swarmy son of a bitch, don't they?
They do, which we will talk about at the end a little bit. I will say this. So Sean Parker at the end, he's like, they paint me, what I do to Eduardo. He's like, I'm like the only person that still works who's still at Facebook that actually talks to Eduardo. He's like, he's my friend. So, and I was like, that's very interesting.
That is interesting. I'd like to hear that from Eduardo, please.
Well, Ed, you'd have to go to Singapore. Then the scene with Christy where she burns the scarf and she's like, "I sent you 47 texts." And she's like, "Why does your status say single on Facebook?" He's like, "Because I set it up when I was single and I don't know how to change it." She's like, "The CFO of Facebook doesn't know how to change his status on Facebook." And he's like, "Yes, and that's pretty embarrassing. I think you should take it as sign as trust that I've told you this."
I do like how Fincher makes every scene like interesting.
Yes.
And so he's talking on the phone to Zuckerberg as you see her setting a fire on his bed behind him.
Yeah.
And it's like, honestly, what's more interesting, that or what they're talking about? Because in the moment, it's what they're talking about. But he has to now turn all of his attention to the fucking fire on his bed.
Because he's like, "You froze the account." He's like, "We don't crash ever. Like, that's what makes us,
It is so crazy to think that $19,000 was all the money at one point that was keeping Facebook afloat.
Yes, correct. So he's like, "You need to come out here. We got the angel investment." And he's like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "Okay, it's water under the bridge." Comes out here, has him sign these new agreements, which when this scene was happening and before I read up on it, I was like, I'm wondering what those agreements said that we're supposed to be like, "Oh, this guy's too stupid to have read these." Like how it could have been possibly written, but it's just like, that's not what happened. So, we can talk about it obviously when we get there. But in the meeting, he's like, "Yo, Mark needs to be protected." And like, And then he's like, well, how much does everyone get? He's like, Sean Parker gets 6%. He's like, I guess I can deal with that. And then it cuts to the deposition. He's like, were you aware you were signing your death certificate? And he's like, no. And he turns to Mark in the deposition. He's like, I was your only friend. And then he's telling him, after he knows he had him sign these agreements, he's like, you have to come back for the 1,000,000-member party. Like, it's going to be great. Like, it's you have to.
That's like the Asperger speaking.
Yeah, I guess a little bit. Because the way he's painted in this, and then obviously some of the things he's done in real life, he comes off as not only a little bit on the spectrum, but also like sociopathic a little
Yeah.
bit. Like doesn't care about his actions on others, doesn't care about their feelings, doesn't like recognize that.
Well,
So
another really great line in the movie, and we passed it just a little bit ago, was when Eduardo's lawyer was repeating. So you put in another 1,000, or you put in 18,000. Yes, into your 1,000. Yeah, so that's 19,000. Yeah, and then Zuckerberg takes out a
hold on,
calculator. He's like, "Oh, hold on,
let me just check your math real
I,
quick.
I got the same thing."
Yeah. And then there's this scene where, and this is also, I mean, it's subtle and maybe people would see it a different way, but Sean Parker takes him to Case Equity just so Zuckerberg can tell these guys to go fuck themselves. Like, I don't need your money, and tell them I said it. And it's like, that's not good business. And like, why are you trying to impress this fucking fool who
Yeah, dude,
lost both of his previous businesses?
and not only that. First of all, he shows up in like a robe and pajamas, which I thought was
Say
pretty
you just
funny.
woke up.
But the other thing is that Mark Zuckerberg through this entire film is portrayed as a guy who can't be impressed. He knows he's the smartest guy in the room. He has, control over everyone because he is so smart and arrogant and yada yada yada. Yet he snivels at Sean Parker's feet, which is just like, why?
Because he's cool. He's
Nah,
cool.
man.
So then he's like, they tell him to come back because Case Equity was so impressed with his fuck you that they're like, we want to make a huge investment.
Who is that real?
No, none of this is real.
Okay.
We'll get there. And so this is kind of it's like the penultimate scene. It's like one of the most famous scenes. It's that scene that the Maze Runner kid made fun of, reenacted. But when he screams, "Mark!" comes out,
in.
and he's like, "No one was deluded except," and then through the depot, was he deluded? Was he deluded? Was he deluded? What were you deluded down to? From 30% to 0.03%.
Yeah.
And then lawyer up, asshole. I'm coming back for everything. And then when Sean Parker has to do the last little fucking like sniveling thing, like, oh, here's your $19,000, but don't cash it. We drew it on the frozen account. And he fakes like he's gonna hit him. He's like, I like standing next to you. It makes me feel so tough.
It makes Eduardo look real cool, actually.
Yeah, it's a good scene. So
And then-
apparently
Oh,
Andrew
go ahead.
Garfield originally auditioned for Zuckerberg, but Fincher decided that he would be better as Eduardo.
Yeah,
And so,
I heard about that. One of the greatest, and we're getting kind of close to the end of the movie now, but a really cool juxtaposition is the $1 million party is happening. Mark's at the office. Sean Parker is partying with presumably underage girls with cocaine as
they're under 21. They go to college.
I don't know. They were doing some heavy.
They're sorority girls.
They were doing some heavy, I don't know how to describe it, but it made it seem like it wasn't on the up and up. But the cocaine definitely didn't make it on the up and up. And so there's a great juxtaposition where Sean Parker is getting caught with girls and coke, getting arrested. At the same time, Mark is at the office opening business cards that say, I'm the CEO, bitch,
Yeah.
which is something Sean Parker told him to do or said was really cool if he did it or, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like he built Sean Parker up to be this like idol. He did this like CEO bitch business card thing. At the same time, Sean Parker is getting arrested for everything that Eduardo was right about him.
Yeah. And it's like he's like, you know, he got mad at Eduardo for embarrassing the company with the chicken thing, which by the way in real life did not happen. Um, and then instantly after fucking over his friend, Sean Parker does this crazy fucking thing, like gets caught with cocaine, and he calls him. He's like, "Do you think Wardo called the cops, or it was Manningham, like that sent the coke in here, that put the coke in here?" And he's just like, "Oh fuck." He's like, "Dude, just go home." Um, and it's just like
Yeah.
instantly, like not regrets, but just like in your face, you made a bad choice in this movie world. And then it ends with Rashida Jones getting this sort of a like one of the bigger like female roles in the movie, and she is a second year lawyer who focuses on jury selection, which is just wild. And she's like, "You're gonna have to settle this, and you're gonna have to pay extra for an NDA." And she's like, "I could get them, to easily. I could get the jury to hate you." And then she's like, "And also, in the grand scheme of things, this is a speeding ticket with what you're building this towards." And the final line, which is juxtaposed with like the way he was left with his ex, is like, "You're not an asshole, but you're trying so hard to be one."
I do really like the advertising marketing thing for this movie because do you remember like the big poster with Eisenberg's face? Like you just see like his eye and it says, "You don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies."
Yeah,
I think that's such a great fucking log line.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously going to go over. I'm going to go over the real story a little bit now, but like you can't knock how great this story is. Like the plot, the direction, everything about this movie is perfect.
It actually reminds me a lot of Saturday Night, that movie that just came out this year about Saturday Night Live, like their first episode, where all the actors that are coming out now are being like, yeah, it's an over exaggeration of what actually happened. Nothing of this caliber is the stuff that actually happened. But honestly, man, we as the audience don't care if it actually happened. It's a good movie, it's entertaining, and even if you just get a few points right, you're getting a story out there that is somewhat inspiring, or maybe it's cautious of telling a tale where maybe the normal story isn't that interesting to be told and it wouldn't be told, or no one would give a shit if it was told any other way, you know?
Right.
So
So
the real
apparently,
story.
well, first of all, Shia LaBeouf turned down the role of Mark Zuckerberg, which I like Shia in a lot of things, but thank the Lord that he turned that down. And then Jonathan Groff, who is of Hamilton fame and
Yeah.
Mindhunter fame.
Yeah, I know who Jonathan Groff is. He plays uh in Frozen.
Yeah, he's the guy.
He's the guy.
He's the
God
dude.
damn it. Christoph.
Yeah, there you go. He auditioned for the role of Sean Parker.
He would have been a
Um,
good Sean Parker.
so Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher wanted to do the movie based off a 14-page book proposal. And like I said, he was getting chapters from Ben Mesrick, who wrote Accidental Billionaires, like as he was finishing them. And Eduardo brought this story to Ben Mesrick, but then stopped talking to him once he entered into the agreement with Facebook. I presumably because of NDA, reasons. So uh, there's this Vanity Fair article that the title of it is "He Thinks We're Going to Take a Swing at Him Inside the Decades-Long Cage Match Between Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss Twins," which is fascinating. And it also goes into Ben Mesrick wrote a crypto book about the Winklevoss twins later on. And and it's this story about how they went and had a conversation with him, like when they settled the case, and it's just this back and forth as they describe it, where once again he's as much of an asshole as he is in the movie, and he's like they have this one line like, Mark, let's bury the hatchet, let's bygones be bygones. We're not saying we created Facebook. And Mark responds, at least we agree on something. And so then he offers them $65 million, which their lawyers are like, that's amazing, you have to take it. And they're like, what the but he stole our idea, and we're just getting, like, he's just writing a check and getting rid of us. And so they took the 20 million in cash. Their lawyers, I think, got 13, and then they took 45 million in stock, which obviously turned out to be a smart idea, because when it blew up, it was hundreds of millions of dollars.
So they're okay.
They're doing all right, but they still, like, it was a principled stance according to them. Like,
Apparently, they threw a bunch of their money in Bitcoin too.
yes, which if they did at the right time, smart on them. Just don't buy Hawk Tuah coin if you're doing that.
Or chill dude or Doge. The other thing too is that Ben Mesrick guy also wrote the book based off the movie that just came out called Dumb Money, about the GameStop stocks.
Well, that makes sense. He also wrote the book that was made into the movie 21, and Kevin Spacey executive produced that and this. I don't know executive produced, but produced.
No, you're right. Executive produced this. Yeah.
I don't know the difference between those.
We're not going to talk about Kevin Spacey.
So hold on. So part of the reason Zuckerberg settled is because at the time they were trying to, in Discovery, get access to his private IMs. And had they gotten that information, Zuckerberg's lawyers apparently were slow rolling handing that over, because in there he has quotes of, like, they're like, well, what are you going to do about the Winklevosses? He's like, I'm going to fuck them, probably in the ear. So, like, kind of admitting, like, yeah, fuck those guys. Like, I'm stealing their shit.
I'm going to fuck them probably in the ear.
Yeah. Then he's also quoted as saying, yeah, so if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses. How'd you manage that? People just submit it. I don't know why. They trust me. Dumb fucks. So just, like, I'll just give you information from people that sign on to my website.
You know what? It's funny, is at a much larger scale, that's what he does now.
I mean, yeah, you agree to sell, like, when you sign up for Facebook, you are the commodity. So he then, when the Winklevosses went to the Crimson to write a story about them stealing this, they interviewed Mark Zuckerberg. He sort of convinced them that they should bury the story, so they agreed to. And then a bunch of machinations. They decided to bring the story back up. He hacked into two of the Crimson newspaper writers or editors or whatever by going into Facebook, seeing all the people that worked at the Crimson who had Facebook profiles, checking their login attempts and seeing if anyone had failed, like logged in but failed because they did the wrong password, and being like, all right, well, if they did the wrong password, maybe they were typing in their Crimson password, which worked.
Dude.
He got in and then was reading the article before they published it about him stealing the idea from ConnectU. So that's bad. There were then further found out that when ConnectU was launched, he hacked into ConnectU, created a fake Cameron Winklevoss profile where he, in the fake profile, he listed Cameron as 7'4", hair color as Aryan blonde, sky blue. He listed his language as waspy. He then
that's actually kind of funny.
Logged into the accounts of some ConnectU users and changed the privacy settings to invisible, and deactivated 20 ConnectU accounts entirely. So
at least he's not petty.
Not a good guy, right? And, like, pretty fun. Like, you're like, oh, I just had an idea. Like, their idea doesn't matter. But then to go and do that, like, I mean, so when the movie started, I was like, what legal theory are they suing him under? And I think it's obviously like fraud. Um, but then like if that stuff had come out, he would have been so fucked. Now, the Eduardo thing, what I read, well, first of all, it's like, oh, they're best friends. But from looking into it, it looks like they became friends like around the time he was like they were doing Facebook. It like doesn't seem like they were like best friends as it's portrayed in the movie, and he fucked over his best friend. But I'm just going to read this. So 6 months after the site launched, Zuckerberg and Dustin Moskovitz moved to Palo Alto. Um, Zuckerberg asked Savrin to work on three things: setting up the company, getting funding, and making a business model. Savrin never did any of those things. Um, and what he also did is apparently Savrin started running his own ads for a job site on Facebook. So, and not paying to run the ads. And Zuckerberg's like, you developed Joboozle, which is, you knew at some point Facebook would probably want to do something with jobs. And you made a side site that will compete with Facebook, and you put up ads for free. The other thing that he apparently did is Zuckerberg's like, I need you to come out to California to sign agreements so we can get these venture capitalists. And he was like, I'll pay for you to come out here. I'll give you freaking flyer miles. And he couldn't get him out there. So he developed this scheme with Sean Parker to essentially like dilute his shares so that he would get low enough so that they could do the venture capital stuff without him.
Uh-huh.
And Sean Parker did help him do that, like gave him the idea. Like they have the communications where he's like, and so then apparently he went to his lawyer and said he wanted to do this, and his lawyer was like, okay, but if you were only diluting this one person's shares, that is breaking your fiduciary duty to a shareholder, like he can sue over this. And I guess Zuckerberg just made the decision of like, well, we need to do this for money. And so I know that eventually he's going to sue and I'm going to have to pay him off, but it's just like what I have to do. So he like, because he couldn't get him to sign like any agreements to bring in the venture capital they needed, he was just like, I'm just going to have to do this so that we can move on, and I'll have to pay him whatever I have to pay him. Which obviously makes like the Savrin character way more less, like we have way less sympathy for that character. And so like I think the movie would have had to focus more on like the Winklevoss part of it. But
the fact that it's kind of an interesting move on Fincher and Sorkin's part is that Zuckerberg's the main character going against two more parties that are way more likable than him, but we're still rooting for Zuckerberg, but not really, right? Like this is kind of like a battle of the gods sort of thing where we're not billionaires. And we're watching people fighting over millions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it's like we don't care.
Yeah, so he is quoted as saying, Eduardo is refusing to cooperate at all. We basically now need to sign over our IP to a new company and just take the lawsuit. I'm going to cut him out and then settle with him. And he'll get something, I'm sure, but he deserves something. He just, I can't take this lag of him not coming out here. So I think like, because the movie, like, it makes you feel sorry a little bit for Zuckerberg and also think he's an asshole, feel sorry for him, makes him a little like sympathetic, but also like not the good guy. And I think, I don't know. To me, the movie itself is like a perfect movie. I don't know if it detracts from it, but it makes it look at you kind of look at a movie a little differently when you're like, I mean, you have to know that all movies are not like, they're not documentaries, and even documentaries, have like an editorial leaning to them. But I think a lot of people, when you see a movie about a real subject, a lot of people just blindly, blind faith take that as like factual.
Yeah.
And in this one, I still find the real story like so interesting. Like the Winklevoss stuff is interesting on its own, But then adding this other plot in the movie with Eduardo, it is like the best part of the movie. And so I'm fine with Fincher and Sorkin like adding that in. But it's also interesting like diving into it and kind of realizing the real story is not as like it's not as nefarious, even though like this guy has done other bad shit, that he did to these other characters.
Right. Um, one thing that I found out, which I just thought was just a funny thing, is Josh Pence that plays Tyler Winklevoss, like from the neck down,
Yeah.
road crew against the real life Winklevosses
Oh, I
back
did
in
not know that.
college. Yeah.
He's actually in the movie as himself.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, so when they are like, hey, those girls in there are freshening up, and he's like, nice, that's him.
Oh, that's him. That's funny. He looks nothing like Army Hammer, but he did used to be a Ralph Lauren model, and I think because he probably was the same height, which is probably more important than anything.
Army Hammer looks pretty close to the Winklevi, though.
We keep saying Winklevi. That is not their name.
No, it's in the movie. He calls them Winklevi because of the like in like when you combine Winklevoss, the Winklevosses would be the plural. He's like Winklevi. You know what I mean? Like
You know what that's a nod to, right?
what?
Is Zuckerberg was proficient in advanced Latin in Harvard.
You had to get one last one out.
One last one, baby.
Yeah, this I'm really glad like we finally did this movie. Like I said, it's a perfect movie, like direction, writing, acting.
Tightness, like pacing.
It's got great like funny moments, it's got great like dramatic moments, like and just like so many scenes where you're like that's the best scene. This is the best scene. I mean, Fincher's kind of a master at that. And then this is like the perfect example of combining like one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite directors. Like I think when this was being made, I was already a big Sorkin guy, and I had seen I think I had seen Fight Club and Benjamin Button at that point. So I was super excited like when this movie was coming out, and then obviously did not disappoint at all. So
I wish I had the understanding and passion of movies that I do now back then. I don't think I was in the middle of high school when that happened, or right before, right? Or graduating high school. And so this is right when I was getting into film. So when I watched this, and I've only watched this one other time before this time, I wish I appreciated and understood on a cinematic level more about this film. So rewatching it again really was like, oh man, I remember my reaction watching this the first time, and I totally underplayed it. So watching this, I was like, it's kind of like a redo for me, and being like, this is a good film, and I can see why people like you really have like a appreciation and connection to it. So yeah, no, I mean this film is really good. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Fincher, but just looking over everything Sorkin wrote, it probably is one of my favorite Sorkin films.
yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, but I mean Sorkin's TV work too is pretty amazing. So
Oh, that's true.
well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we lovingly watch The Social Network.